There was two families that loved one another. They knew each other all the way from high school. They were actually, the two guys were friends and the two girls were friends. They happened to marry one another, and they lived next door to each other. They were raising their families all together. And this one particular Saturday, they were going to go out to the lake and just have a great time together, all the kids and everybody. But Bob, one of the husbands, had to stay home and work, which is the case sometimes. And as he was working, about noon, he heard a scratch on the door and a whine in the backyard. And so he went back out, and there was his Labrador retriever with the neighbor's rabbit in its mouth. And it was very obviously dead. There was dirt all over it. This was a very expensive rabbit because they raised rabbits. And Bob felt just really bad. I mean, he didn't know what to do. He got the rabbit out of the dog's mouth, took it into the kitchen and washed it up and held it up. Now he had a dead, wet rabbit. So he went to the bathroom, got the hair dryer, and got that thing dried. And now he had a dead, fluffy rabbit, and he still didn't know what to do. So he got this idea. He was going to go over to the neighbor's house, put the rabbit back in its cage, and then when they came home from the lake, they will have thought that maybe the rabbit just died or something, but it wouldn't be pointing fingers at the dog. So he did that. And several hours later, they come back home, and after about 20 minutes, Bob hears this scream just at the top of a lady's lungs. He goes in the backyard, and his neighbor, she has passed out on the backyard. And he runs over to his buddy, and he says, "What's going on? What's wrong?" And he said, well, it's the rabbit. It's the rabbit. He's pointing up at the rabbit, and Bob says, "Oh, yeah, it's dead, isn't it?" And the friend said, "No, you don't understand. It died last night. We buried it, and it's back again." That's the only joke I have that has to do with resurrection, so you got it. How about that? Our story today is about a widow, which means that she had no husband anymore, that he had passed away, and that she and friends were coming out of the gates to bury her, evidently one and only son. And so we start off by understanding that the widow was bankrupt. She is bankrupt two ways. She was bankrupt emotionally, and she was bankrupt financially. When you lose two of your family members that are so meaningful to you, it takes an emotional toll. Just like if you lose a friend that moves off to some other city, somebody that was really close to you, and now you got to get used to life without that friend. It takes a big toll emotionally. But it also takes a big toll for her financially, because in those days, there was no social security system. The way that they took care of one another is that the sons would take care of the aging parents as they got older. And so this widow had no means of taking care of herself in her old age. The son had died, the husband had died, and now what was going to happen to her? Can you feel the bankruptcy of her life at this point as Jesus happens to be walking by? Well, Jesus in the story was walking by, and the scripture tells us that he saw what was going on and he was moved by compassion. That's what moves God, is compassion. God's not a God that's out there somewhere. When I was a teenager, that's where I thought God was, out there somewhere. And I was very glad that God was not right next to me, because I was doing things that I knew God would not like, and I didn't need him close while I was doing those things. But I didn't understand until later on that God is not a God that's out there. God is a God that is right here. And he cares for us. He's not a God standing next to us going, "Oh, you did that one wrong. Oh, that one was wrong too. Oh, okay, you got one right. Good. Oh, look, 3 more wrong." That's not the kind of God we worship. We worship a God of compassion that sees a widow and her dead son and does something about it. The scripture in Psalms a little bit earlier, let me go back and reread one of the verses, verse 13. The Lord is like a father to his children, tender and compassionate to those who fear him. You see, that's what the psalmists understood God was, a compassionate God. A God that really cared about his people. Now, the widow didn't know that Jesus was passing by. She didn't fall down on her knees and beg. Nobody pointed a finger and said, oh, it was your fault that your son died. The son just died. It was a tragedy. You know, there's lots of tragedies in this world. The idea that somebody loses their job, or a child dies, or a spouse leaves, or during a football game, one of the players gets injured. Those are tragedies not caused by God. God is the compassionate one that's standing next to us. He is the one that is helping us out in our difficult time of life. Like when that friend leaves. Like when the house is about to go back to the mortgage company. Those are the times when the compassionate God clicks in. Now, it's God that chooses how he's going to help. Because there are different ways that God can help us in every point of life. In this particular story, God, through Jesus Christ, decided to help out by resurrecting the son. But there are other ways that God could have helped this woman. He could have brought some relatives into her life that she had forgotten about or didn't know about. They could have taken care of her. Or it could have been some friends that she knew might have taken her in and cared for her that way. Or neighbors. See, there's a lot of ways that God could have moved to take care of the widow. In this story, it was the resurrection. But it's not how God responds to our need. It's the fact that he does respond to shattered lives. You know, when we are rejected and we just don't know what's going to happen or where we're going to go, and life just doesn't make any sense anymore, and there are pieces of our life everywhere, and we don't know what to do. God does. He knows how to put the pieces of our life back together in such a way that we are stronger than we were when our life was shattered. You know, it's human nature to exhaust all of our resources before we turn to God. We sell that pendant to have enough money to get us through next month. And then that month, things haven't changed, and so we sell something else. And finally, 3, 4, 5 months down the road, we have nothing else to sell. We are at the end of our rope. Oh, there it is. You ever been at the end of your rope before? Didn't know where you were going to go or what you were going to do? And finally, in our humanness, we turn to this God who loves us more than we will ever know, and we say, God, help. And you know what God's response is? God's response is, I've been waiting for you to say that.